your newest book, your latest book, in Polish called The Claw of Justice, just came out in Poland. So the first question I'd like to ask you is a question you ask a lot in your book. What's different? What's the same?
I would say what's different is that we're not inside an animal protagonist, so we don't get the inside perspective of the parrot Grey. We just see him from the outside, and that, I think, makes him a bit more mysterious, a bit more interesting in a way, because he says things. He's a parrot, so he can talk, and he gets a glimpse of his inner life. But at the same time, there's a boundary there, and we never quite know what he really means or how much he understands. And I find it interesting because it just gives you a bit of adds a bit of a mystery to an animal character. Because one of the things I find interesting about animal characters, and there has been the odd animal character in my books, is that they are same, but they're also different. So the question of I think the question of what's same, what's different is also asked on another level. Sort of how similar are these animals to us? What can we recognise? What can we not recognise? And I suppose there are a few things in the parrot that we don't recognise, and that leaves a bit of an edge to the whole thing, I think. So I quite enjoyed that, writing it a bit differently this time. And also, you have to be aware that grey parrots are very, very intelligent animals. So I think I could put myself into a sheep, but whether I'd be able to do it for a grey parrot, I think I'm probably too smart for an inner perspective for me. At least that could be the case. So I was a bit careful there. So that is something that is a new approach, I think.
Yeah.
What's similar, or I wouldn't say same, I'm hoping I'm not doing same exactly, but what is sort of recognisable and a bit similar is that we got a mystery story, we got an animal character involved in solving it, we got this sort of tension between humans and animals, we got a lot of, or I hope we got enough sort of like funny situations that arise because you got an animal involved and things don't go quite as they planned, and because animals don't obey the rules, or certainly not the rules of being polite and the rules of how things usually work. So there's a lot of that there, I hope. And of course there's the mystery itself that has to be solved.
Of course, there's a wonderful mystery in there. But you said you're sort of reaching towards the classical tropes a little bit, and so what makes you sort of go towards that? Because we could see nods towards the classics before, Miss Maple, for example, and I feel like the vibe of the book or the atmosphere itself was maybe not only because of the story itself, but also because of the setting, the wonderful Cambridge, which is like a menagerie of its own a little bit, with all the quirky professors. Like, we still have a lot to discover, even though this time you focus on people rather than animals.
Definitely.
But we're still learning about a species not quite like ourselves.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I had the pleasure of spending some time at various British universities myself, so it was delightful to actually see it. It's quite faithful. But I see a lot of sort of Agatha Christie vibe, like a very, very classical vibe. Did you fancy writing a classical mystery novel rather than a crime novel?
There's also quite a bit of Sherlock Holmes in there, because you've got this sort of pair of investigators. You've got
the sidekick.
The sidekick, you've got the smart one, the stupid one, although here it's not quite clear who's the smart one, who's the stupid. But it's definitely a variation on that, and there's a lot of all these sort of weird strange characters, and also that rather closed setting. You've got this sort of set of characters, you've got the you've got the old building, so there's a lot of classical stuff going on, and I've done that because I really enjoy it. It's something I find pleasure of myself when I read things. I think there's it has a lot of charm and a lot of it's very apt for the kind of story it is. And I think it's also, I use these things as a bridge for the reader to come across to something a bit more different, something a bit off from what they expect. So I mean, you got this thing with a parrot, and it's a bit of a leap of faith to just go along with the story, and I think it makes it a lot easier when you recognise a lot of other elements, and when you recognise the good old English crime setting. On the one hand, you get attention there because it's all as it should be, and it's not. And on the other hand, it helps you to accept the odder bits. So I always find it it's like a bridge for a reader, I say. So it's something that really I hope helps them to accept things that they would find a bit harder to accept otherwise.
That's a really good point. And also I've been thinking of something you said a while ago in one of your interviews. You probably said it in many interviews because people love to ask you those questions. You said about when you were writing your sheep novels, you said that you were trying to start thinking like a sheep, that it's not an allegory, it's not a sheep, it's not a stand-in for a person, it's a sheep.
At least as good a sheep as I can make.
As good a sheep as you can make.
I've got my human limitations, but I'm aiming for a sheep, yes.
But we're aiming for an actual sheep and not for a stand-in for a human. And you've been sort of moving away from that in your further novels, I feel, as a reader. And in this case, you sort of focus on a person, but I feel like we're still doing the same thing in a way. We're trying to recognize the other person who's still the main character of your novel, Augustus Hoff. He's anything but ordinary as well. He has tons of his own quirks, balancing on mental disorders. So did you find that a challenge, or did you find that something that you wanted to explore?
Well, I think that kind of leap from your own being into someone else, whether it's a sheep or a person, it for me is one of the key things of what literature, what stories are about, because I think it's a really unique thing. You don't get it anywhere else. You don't get it in films in the same way. You get that sort of being inside someone and experience life in a different way. I think it's something pretty much unique to literature, not entirely, but in a sort of a pure experience. So that's something that's very important to me. And of course, sheep are a bit of an extreme case, which made it fun and which made it different. But in a way, I think everyone's a strange creature to everyone else, and it once you're sort of aware of that and you start looking for that, it can be really good fun and also interesting and challenging to put yourself in someone else's place. And it's a mind game, and it's one that I just really enjoy playing, and I think it's something that really helps you discover the world as well, because the world's different for everyone, and once you sort of took a step and look through someone else's eyes, you discover that all kinds of things that you thought were familiar all of a sudden get a different meaning and look a bit different and are charged with different things. And I find that it's just what I do, it's what I enjoy. So I suppose it'll always happen in some way or another when I write stories. And of course I'm looking for the edgy things, because it's not quite as much, it's like travelling. If you travel next door, it's not quite as exciting as if you travel to Patagonia. So this time maybe it wasn't Patagonia, but it was maybe, I know, Egypt or something recognisable but mildly exotic.
At least a tiny village in Outer Hebrides.
There you
or
go.
In the Hebrides, where was it? Yeah, so at least
like
that exotic or different enough.
Yeah, I think it's sort of it's a way of making it interesting. It's also a way of making people aware of that journey that happens, because it always happens, but you don't really, if you just go to work in your bus and it all looks the same, you're still journeying, but you're not aware of it. And if it's something completely different, then the journey and the process also comes into focus.
You know what? What comes into light very often not only when reading your novels, but also when reading about your novels, is the fact how different they are in a way. Like, even though you use a lot of tropes, even though you use a lot of references, your books are still delightfully, quirky and different. And I spoke to your publisher yesterday, your Polish publisher, not Random House, and I said to them, so from your perspective, from the publisher's perspective, who's the target audience of one of your biggest writers? How would you classify her? And they could not give me an answer, which is baffling in a way. Well, it's not when I read your novels, but it is baffling because it's the first rule of publishing. Like, you have to fit in some box, because not fitting in a box could make you, but it could as easily break you, be a doom. So how is it for you as a writer in your career? How does it feel not to be able to fit in any of those easy boxes?
Well, I know they're struggling. I mean, the German publishers are also struggling. Everyone's sort of struggling a bit. And usually the crime label helps, because at least there's something you can hang on to and you can sort of use for marketing. It was more difficult with the last one, which wasn't quite a crime thing. The one with the
police. It was more over the place.
What was it? It was something like Step in the Dark in Polish, something like that.
Yes, Treading Through Darkness. Dunkelspunkt.
That was even more difficult for them to frame. And I understand there are certain
wrap their minds around it.
And I understand that framing is an important thing. It's a bit like people want to know what they're getting, or at least some idea of what they're getting. So it's a tension between being able to surprise them, because that's something I definitely want. I want to surprise my readers. I don't want to give them what they exactly what they expect, because that would be boring in my eyes. But I don't want to completely baffle them either. I want to be accessible. So I know it's difficult for publishers, and that's also I think in a way the crime or the mystery frame that I have for most of my stories is a nod to that. To the reader and also to the publisher. It's not something I feel like I'm obliged to do. It's not nobody ever said, okay, you really have to get your act together and write a proper, I don't know, crime or
do a proper murder, please.
Not like that, but I'm aware that framing helps, and I'm aware that framing can also help the story itself. And with the sheep, it was really a big help to have the that classic mystery plot around it, because the classic whodunit thing, because of course being in the sheep's world is quite a step for the reader as well, and having that very familiar plot helped them to accept it and to go along and to come along for a ride. And I think it still works in a way. It's one of the reasons why Grey is another mystery. It helps to just ease them into the unfamiliar, because it all looks a bit. You recognise, I think you know how it usually works. You've got the victim, you've got the investigator, and it's all a bit different, but it's still similar enough so you can come along. And the fact that the reader knows about how the genre usually works also gives me the opportunity for irony and for breaking the convention.
And your characters are pretty self-aware as well.
And they're sort of. Obviously, the characters themselves know about the genre as well, and know how they deviate from it. So there's a lot of the fact that it's so familiar gives a lot of room for play and for deviation. But of course, at some point, it will remain out of the box, and in a way, that's what I'm aiming for. So I realize that some people prefer in the box, but they have to read someone else. I'm afraid I can't really cater to them, because. I'm a first reader, and I want to read something that is fun and something that surprises me. And if that doesn't happen in my own book, then I'd be disappointed with myself, I think. So you do have a lot of inspiration, or a lot of sources of inspiration. So could you give us a bit of an insight in what you read, or what you actually like to see, not only in yourself as a writer, but what you like to see in other writers? Like, what do you aim for? What do you seek for as a reader? I think the first thing I look for, and there's really not that much difference between me as a reader as a writer. It's the same. It's the same experience.
You like to indulge.
Yes, exactly. And I think the first thing I look for is the illusion of being convinced, of being there, as a kind of reality to what I read.
Yeah.
The moment where I feel authors too present. I mean, there's some authors, famous authors, certainly very good authors, who just can't keep out of it. You know, you want to just sort of comment all the time, which can be fun, but it's a completely different thing from what I'm trying to do. And I usually feel that at some point you want to push the author aside and say, okay, get on with the story. I want to sort of, I want the magic of having something on a page, and then all of a sudden it's not on a page anymore, it's in your head. I think it's quite a beautiful and very unique process, and I'm looking for having that as pure as you can, without sort of any words that you feel like are not I mean, the language has to work, obviously, but it also has to be complex enough and somehow real enough, not too smooth, not too groomed. So, I mean, the person who really does it well, this is boring, but I mean, Shakespeare does it so well. I mean, it's not even novels, but he has a character on stage, and within 5 minutes, you forget everything about the fact that he is sort of dressed in a stupid outfit, standing on some wooden boards, and you're just there, and he does it with a few words, and his characters are just so spot on and so complex and so believable. I think believability is one of the key things I'm really looking for.
Even in the weirdest character,
even the weirdest, especially in the weirdest character, I
find
the
weirdness.
I've got a weakness for fantasy fiction sometimes, so proper fantasy. Like I like George R. Martin, for example, or I like China Miéville. I'm not so much anymore, but the early things he did. So
proper full-blown fantasy.
Yeah, full-blown fantasy with proper either sort of
dragons,
utopian,
swords,
dystopian things, dragons, swords, maybe even sort of like science fiction of Philip K. Dick, so things like that. And I find that the more far-fetched, or the sort of stranger or more indulging the content, the more harder they have to work to make it realistic. And I mean, I don't like there's a certain genre of fantasy where just poof, magic happens, and it's just like that, and it can be very frustrating. But if it's done well, the step of being there and believing it all, despite the fact that this doesn't work and I've never seen a dragon before and all that, is just one step further into the reality, in spite of the fact it's just on a page thing, which I enjoy. And I think it can be done very well. Sometimes not, but I certainly like the fact that somebody takes advantage of all the things they can do, because when you sort of sit down in front of your page and want to write, I mean, there's a complete freedom. You can do whatever you want, and why you should always be stuck in the confines of what your daily life experiences, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy people who take advantage of that freedom, really go for something new and different, and but it never works without believable characters, never works without the psychology being spot on and in place. So I think in a way I want to be enchanted. I'm looking for that magic moment of being transported into a story, and I think I'm looking for good stories more than for good writing. I mean, good writing has to be there as to not obstruct the sort of the illusion. But sometimes I find that writing can be a bit too precious. If you've got a feeling that somebody has, put too much effort into phrasing, that
honing every
perfectly,
phrase,
it sort of can feel a bit stilted and a bit just the tad artificial. It can still be very beautiful, and it can be move more towards poetry, but it's not what I'm looking for, because it can be just that tad too much. So
thing, and this your great love for the unlimited unabashed fantasy. I can't help but think of Dunkersprung, of your previous book, which really does stand out, even for your standards. So what made you go for something so intense in the terms of fiction and imagination, and like you throw so many different characters and types and species of characters at your readers, and it's just like a festival of characters and forms and everything. So did you just want to get it out of your system?
Not so much. I just wanted to see what could be done, because the sheep have been very enjoyable, but very, very confined. You basically you're stuck on a meadow, right? So it took a lot of. It was a lot of. It was a challenge and discipline to keep it interesting within that very, very tight frame. Yeah. So once the frame was gone, I suppose I went a bit mad and did whatever I could, and just sort of, tried things in different directions. And maybe it was a bit much. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but I suppose it was a step from the field to London in this weird world. It's something I would enjoy reading. So. Something that just goes a step further into the unknown, and I know that not everyone was willing to come along for it because it was different. But I just wanted to try it, and I felt better for it, I suppose. And now I feel better. It was easier to do something a bit more constrained like this. But if you sort of ask me which of the books I'd be most tempted to do a sequel of, I think it would probably be Dunkelsprung, because there's a lot I still would like to do.
So much to explore.
Exactly, there's so much fun things to happen there. But so it was a fun project for me. This was a fun project too, in a very different way. In a way, it felt good to come back to the smaller things, because in a way Dunkelsprung was very big in terms of scope and ideas and characters, and it felt good to have more time for smaller details and for little oddities and for contrasting out, because I think Dunkelsprung is very much sort of in its own field, and this one here sort of has a strong tension between what we know and what we don't know, and so it felt good to be back with that as well.
Oh yeah, definitely, and to see this world, which at the very end you mentioned that it is and it isn't the real Cambridge you write about, and there is a lot of real Cambridge I could recognise from my own visits, but there was also this delightful bit. Do the professors really receive the privilege of walking on grass?
Yes.
In Cambridge as the only ones.
Yes.
Because that was.
I think you have to be a member of a college, not necessarily a professor, but
a faculty.
That is very. There's these porters, and they actually have to keep an eye out, because sometimes there's tourists, and they always have to shoo the tourists from the grass, because it's a very strict thing.
It's the thing, only privilege.
And actually, if you're sort of accompanied by a member of college, you're allowed to go as well. So I've been walking on the grass. It was great. Yes. Accompanied
by the member of faculty. Yes. So these are the delightful details that are actually true. That I think make it even better.
A lot of that is true, and sometimes I feel it's a shame that people don't know that they're really true, because
they're just reading it. Leonie made it up.
Exactly, and that's also the case for Dunkelsprung, where a lot more is real than you'd think with all the flea circus stuff. There's a lot of that is real, and sometimes I feel it's a bit like it's one of these aspects of making people discover the world anew, and sort of finding things they didn't know before. And a lot of the parrot stuff sort of is a lot more is real in there than you'd think at first glance, and there's really the tiny twists and touches. One of the reasons why I had that little, this is not the real Cambridge thing, because there's always some detail you get wrong. If somebody knows a place well, they go and say, that building is not doesn't have sandstone. It's a different kind of these little details, and you never can really do a place justice, which is why everything, even if it's researched, will always be fantasy if you write about something. And I think that's a nod to that.
But I think you do a marvelous job, just sort of blurring this line.
Yeah. And you'll also notice that the college, Augustushofen, was not mentioned, because I was very careful of stepping on toes, because you never know how close you really are to reality when you...
Oh, yeah.
So there might be somebody just saying, okay, hang on, that's me.
So if you could, to wrap it up, if you could give us perhaps one book that you think your readers should look for after reading your books. They're out of your books, they've read them a number of times, and they want something that you, as their favourite writer, recommends. What would you tell them to go and read?
It'll be two really different things. One's an absolute classic. I've just read that. So once Anna Karenina, it's very far for there won't be any parrots, there won't be any sheep, but I just enjoy it. And I think people should read it.
There might be a sheep or two in Anna Karenina.
In the background. There's these things about peasants, and there might be the odd sheep walking through, but don't expect any parrots or sheep. But it's just, I know, it's just a beautiful book, and it's so well done. It makes you aware that it's a story you've heard hundreds of times, but it's all in the telling, it's all in the execution, and I think it's just beautiful done. The other thing is probably for people who enjoy my books, and I would give China Merville a go, the first one, which was called Perdido Street Station. That is more of a Dunkelsprung kind of thing, so it's very much fantasy, but there's some really odd and strange and wonderful bits and pieces
vibe
in there. And it's a lot darker, so there won't be that much fun and giggling and enjoyment, but it is very well done, I think, and strange and wonderful.
Well, we will definitely be looking into it. Thank you ever so much for coming today to talk to us. The latest book of Leonie Swann, The Claw of Justice, or the original title, Grey, the Kriminalroman, is out in Poland now. We're the first country to have it translated, we're very proud to announce. So everybody go and read it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.